Okay, I'm recording. Right.
Well, welcome to the Kent Freedom Movement's first presentation. Tonight we're very pleased and honoured to have Mr. Albert Burgess here, who's going to present a case for treason. And thanks for all turning up. I know some of you have come a fair distance, and thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you again. Mr. Albert Burgess.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
Thank you very much.
Now, if any of you have seen me before, you know that I never actually read from notes. But I'm going to make an exception. I'm going to read you this. Now, this little booklet is called Inside Britain, and it's a story of our Constitution, and it was written, I am told, by our favourite Lord Chancellor, what's his name, Piggy Falconer, and, would you believe, Sherry Blair. And what it says, basically, is conventions develop gradually to become accepted practice, and many are unwritten. For example, it was never formally stated that the Queen or the King must agree to any proposal for a new law passed by both Houses of Parliament. So what they're saying is that it doesn't matter about the royal assent. The Queen could dislike a law as much as she likes, but in fact she can't say no to it because she doesn't have the right. And they say here that it was never written that she has that right. Now, we have become used with the Labour government, in fact politicians generally, to understanding that they wouldn't know the truth if it got up and smacked them in the mouth. This is a history of the common law of England. You can download this off the internet. It's well worth a read, I have to say. And it's written by Sir Mathew Hale, who was the Chief Justice of the King's Bench in 1713. And what Sir Mathew Hale says about the passing of law in this country is that these laws... Well, let's get rid of the blue, I can read it better without the blue probably. That's better. Those laws, therefore, that I call leges scripta, or written laws, are such as are usually called statute laws, or acts of Parliament, which are originally reduced into writing before they are enacted or receive any binding power. Every such law being in the first instance formally drawn up in writing and made, as it were, a tripartite indenture between the King, the Lords and the Commons. For without the concurrent consent of all those three parts of the legislature, no such law is or can be made. But the kings of this realm, with the advice and consent of both Houses of Parliament, have power to make new law, or to alter, repeal or enforce the old, and this has been done in all succession of ages. How about that for calling Sherry Blair and Mr. Falconer a liar? Because it has been written down, and it has been written down a tremendous amount. Now, the main problem that we have is that people don't understand the constitutional law. They understand about parking tickets and they don't like them very much. They understand about speed cameras and they don't like them very much. And they understand that you can't walk into Sainsbury's and walk out with a turkey tucked under your arm. But they don't actually know much about the Constitution. Now, in order to rectify that, I have spent a great deal of money on old history books and old constitutional law books, and I've drawn up this, which is a layman's guide to the Constitution. I'm going to sell you some of these later on if you feel like buying them, but they tell you how our Constitution has developed, but I'm going to tell you that right now. I have, for those of you who prefer it, put that onto a CD. So it can actually be played through your computer, and if you've got it in your computer, you can actually print directly off your computer. It's in A5, but you can print directly off the computer. This contains some 600 pages of documents liberated by Dave Barnbury from the Public Records Office. It contains the stuff, a lot of the stuff that's on this, which is his own CD, but there's a lot of stuff on this which is not on these, so I suggest you need to buy the whole lot, get the package. It contains the full FCO 301046 documents, which are not on that, and it contains the Heath Pompidou talks between Heath and Pompidou before we go in, and it got in there quite clearly in the Heath Pompidou talks, where Heath has told our main negotiator, Sir Con O'Neill, that he is not to negotiate entry into the European Union, or the EEC as it then was. He is merely to take whatever the French tell us we're going to have. Okay? Now, where did that constitution come from? It came from, initially, Germany. With the Angles and the Saxons and the Jews. And where did they come from? Well, we think that they came from a place called Scythia, and they were Scythians. And we think that the Scythians actually were one of the lost tribes of Israel, who got lost coming out of Egypt, ended up on the steppes of Russia, and became known as the Scythians. And then when the Scythians vanished off the face of the earth in Russia, the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes appeared in Germany. So they think there's a direct correlation between the two. Now, the Angles and Saxons didn't have kings. What they had was everybody was equal, and everybody had a set of rules by which they lived so they could live peacefully. And the only time they actually had a king or a general, more likely a general rather than a king, was when they were going off to fight somebody. And then they would elect somebody and they'd say, right, Bill, you're a great lad with a sword and a battle axe, you can be the governor for this battle. And they'd go off, they'd elect him. Now if he did well and they won the battle, and they won it well, then next time they had a battle, then they may well elect him again. But if he didn't do so well, then what they would do is they would put him back into the ranks and they would elect somebody else. But when these guys kept winning and winning and winning, because leadership is something you're born with, you either have it or you haven't, and when these guys kept winning and winning and winning, it then became just the second nature to think, right, well, we're going to have a war, let's go and get Bill out and he can come over and he can command us again because he does a great job. And eventually he developed into a sort of a prince or a king, and then he always had the job. Now, there was no such thing as inheritance, and what they would do is whenever they needed somebody, they would elect somebody. Now, it didn't mean that the current king, if he died and he had a son, that the son wouldn't get him, because if the son was the best man there to get him, he would be elected in. So he got it partially through inheritance in the fact that he was in the front of the class when they came to the vote, but also because he was a good lad and he knew what he was doing, Daddy taught him well, he would then get it and he would be the next king. And when they were in Germany, they used to go off and they'd fight various battles. And from time to time they'd go on raids to other places. And in fact they visited us over here a couple of times. Now, this country at the time was peopled by the Celts. The Celts were ruled basically by the Druids, who were the priesthood of the Celts country, and they weren't very nice particularly. They believed in human sacrifice and all sorts of other things. But they were made up of tribes of Celts scattered all over Britain. And when the Romans invaded, and they eventually stayed for 400 years, what they did was they gradually, the Celts became Romanised, and they lost the ability